Must learn to give and take.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir. But you are the caretaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dominic,
My name is Jonathan.
and welcome to the first episode of The End Credits, the show where the two of us discuss our thoughts on a film of our choosing. And today, we're talking about The Shining.
Yeah. So the past couple of weeks, we've actually watched The Shining.
Yeah,
2-3 times probably.
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, because our parents was like, "Oh, we want to watch The Shining," so I was like, "Okay." And then eventually, we were like, "Oh, that'd be a good episode for the podcast," because it actually has some stuff we wanted to talk about
Right,
during it.
right.
So for the Shining, it was directed by Stanley Kubrick, with a release date of May 23rd, 1980. With a runtime of 2 hours and 26 minutes.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it wasn't that short.
Wasn't that short?
The genre is a psychological horror, and it stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scottman Crothers, I believe. That's how you say his name?
I think it's Scatman Crothers.
Oh,
Scatman.
okay. And Danny Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So for just a short plot for our viewers, Jack Torrance becomes the winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado, hoping to cure his writer block. He settles along with his wife, Wendy, and his son, Danny, who is plagued by psychic premonitions. As Jack's writing goes nowhere and Danny's visions become more disturbing, Jack discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to unravel into a homicidal maniac and hellbent on terrorizing his family. That's the summary on Google right there.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the first thing I want to mention is that so Danny and Jack both use their real names. Danny Lloyd being Danny, and then Jack Nicholson.
That's actually interesting when I saw
being
that.
Jack Torrance.
Wait.
Yeah,
I knew Jack Torrance because Jack Nicholson, but I didn't know for Danny.
Yeah, Danny Lloyd is Danny Torrance. And I was just like, I didn't know that Danny also used his real name in the film, which must have been strange, but
it's kind of helpful too because, they didn't have to like refer to them as different people. Like, oh, I know you as, said real person.
Exactly. So I guess for the most part, it was probably okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, after we've seen this film several times.
Right, several times.
Throughout our lifetime. But I feel like I've never really paid attention to it. Maybe like a couple years back was the first time I actually paid attention to the film.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, this is like, oh, okay, this is strange, but I knew that, because mom and dad watched it quite a bit. So watching it and actually understanding it a little bit more, I was like, oh, this isn't bad. But I think first impressions for me was, this is a really messed up movie. This is a really messed up film.
I was in the same boat as you. Like, I didn't really, so we had a pass with it, right? Because of our parents, but like,
right.
I, just like you, I didn't really view it as like anything. I didn't see it like in a film's perspective of like critiquing it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I think actually the recent viewings that were like, okay, this actually has more to it than
you realize.
Yeah. Then it's just okay. This is just a weird film, scary movies. Because like I'm not really fond of any horror genre movies.
Yeah,
it's just not my thing.
You suck.
It's just I don't find, I guess, joy in it. I don't find it particularly interesting in any horror. I don't know how you would interest me into like some other realm. Like, sure, it's for the time of October, when we're premiering this episode,
right.
It makes sense to watch horror because that's like, oh, it's Halloween time, where let's get into the mood. But other than that, why would you watch a horror film?
Yeah,
some random June, July. Why would you bust out, The Shining for?
I mean, I do that.
unless you. Yeah,
not necessarily Shining, but yeah. First impressions, it just I thought it was very strange, very messed up. That was like the first thing that popped in my mind after we finished watching it for the podcast.
It's definitely like very weird and off-putting at points because there's like particular like, you know, oh, why would you cut to this thing right now? Or, oh, why would you show this thing? Like, what do these series of images mean together? And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, what's going on?
Right. I think the first thing, like when we started, there's this reoccurring joke that I always think about back in my film study class in high school when we watched The Shining, which is like the first time like I kind of, or now we didn't actually, oh no, it wasn't film study, my mistake. It was during our English class actually.
Oh, right.
where we watched the opening of The Shining. But there was this like reoccurring joke that the scariest part of the intro is that light blue opening credits.
It's terrible.
It's so bad. And it's
so
a
bad.
reoccurring joke. So every time I watch it, it's always funny to bring that back up. And it's so scary.
It's
that light blue text.
It's
so
like
bad.
that's the start of, you know, being horrified psychologically. You know, that
Yeah.
blue text on that, you know, that forest mountain background. You know,
Right.
it's like, why did they choose this light blue and they could have
Yeah.
chosen like a white or something like that? Or
It could have been white.
it's just a weird, off-putting. It's off-putting.
It was
And
80s.
It does its job right there.
Yeah. Really, really cool opening with the following of the vehicle going through.
Right.
Really nice, pleasant looking background and imagery.
Yeah, nowadays it just use a drone, but I assume back then it was either helicopter or miniatures. That's all you had.
Not exactly sure, but every time like I watch it though, it's so like, oh man, it just feels like something's following you, especially with the music. The music really sets that tone in the opening when we're just seeing the car. It's so grim. And you're just like something's following this car, and it's like it's looming over.
Mm-hmm.
Looming over, and the whoever's driving the vehicle doesn't even know it. And honestly, as we could move forward, you realize that the family doesn't know it.
Right.
For what we see. There was a lot of ambiguity in this film. A lot of meaning. What I mean by that is like it's all pretty vague. A lot of just random, not random. I don't want to say random, but this vagueness that we don't really know how the pieces connect together, and more than likely they have some kind of double meaning.
Right. On my note cards here, I did write that like, what does this stuff mean, or you know, where does this go, or I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah, like you could take it one way, but then maybe later on in the film you might say, oh, it takes it this way, and doesn't really give answers to some of these things.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. Like looking into The Shining, when I did some background research, obviously it's based on Stephen King's novel, The Shining, you know, of the same name. So I was doing like research into, because I've always heard that The Shining, the film, was not the best adaptation for the movie.
I heard
it was not the best adaptation.
Sure Stephen King didn't like it at first, and it wasn't actually like taken seriously to begin with. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily know about it not being taken seriously, but I do know that yes, Stephen King did not like it, and for the longest time, and he's sort of grown to it to a certain extent. But I remember hearing from friends that who have read The Shining that the movie was very different, and I was curious why, and honestly, like it makes me, after watching The Shining again recently, it makes me want to read the book and recognize the differences. I actually do remember several years back, I did attempt to read the book, and I do remember that it was different from the get-go, but I only read like the first like few pages, and it didn't get much further. So
what I've heard is the like changes in characters, not like any particular, moments and stuff like that, but like focus.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure if I'm correct, like I've heard that the book focuses more on Danny's character overall more than like Jack's.
Uh-huh.
And in the movie, it obviously probably focuses more on Jack than on Danny. And that was a change there. And then obviously the room number was changed
Oh, right.
from 217 to 237.
Yeah. For the sake of, for the sake of the hotel that it was based off of, so then that way because they thought that it would deter people from
Don't go into this room.
going into this room due to the film. It was interesting because when I was looking into to the inspiration for the story, it was actually inspired by the Stanley Hotel at Yosemite. And what's weird is that, and Stephen King even like mentioned this, that he was upset that Kubrick didn't film.
Oh, there?
He didn't film at the Stanley Hotel because it's a real place, obviously. And he didn't end up filming there, but he based it off of this other hotel. I don't remember what it's called. It starts with an A.
It was Stanley or Stephen King?
Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick wanted to. He ended up basing the hotel off of this other hotel that was somewhere else. He didn't base it off of Stanley.
Right.
He ended up just going with this other hotel, and I don't remember the name. I know it starts with an A, but it ended up being based off of another real hotel elsewhere, and not the Stanley Hotel that's in Yosemite. Or actually, wait a minute. No, I think oh man, now I'm feel like I'm mixing it up. I don't know if Stanley is in Yosemite or if it was actually in Colorado, because one of the two I believe was actually in
the actual Colorado location.
Right. Okay, wait a minute. No. So yeah, the Stanley Hotel is located in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. And the other one, which is the Ewanee Hotel, that's the one that's in Yosemite, which is the one that Stanley Kubrick based off of. That's the hotel that he used for his film.
Okay, and Stephen King used this other Stanley Hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the book, or overall, Stephen King based his version of the hotel off of the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. And Stanley Kubrick used the hotel in Yosemite called the Ewanee Hotel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Okay.
So he used a different hotel. Why, I'm not exactly sure, but they didn't. I don't believe they actually filmed on location for that. For the interior shots, they ended up recreating it.
So is this hotel that they actually shot in the film, is that a real place?
It's a real place.
Okay.
But I don't think they actually filmed on location for the interior shots. It's a real place, but they recreated it.
Oh,
if
somewhere
I'm not mistaken.
else?
Yeah.
Interesting.
If I'm not mistaken.
Interesting.
I know that the exterior shots that they...
that's a real...
It's also a real place, but they filmed like maybe one tracking shot on location, but most of the exterior shots were shot on a studio set.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I'm not exactly 100% sure for the interior stuff.
Wow, is it really that much cheaper to just create the stuff rather than just take the hotel location?
I don't think it was about cost. I think it was more so about that way they could do anything they wanted with it without any sort of restrictions. Because obviously with a real location...
You can't destroy this section.
There's only so much you can do.
Okay.
And I'm sure they didn't want to do that. So what's really cool is that you can actually go visit this Ewanee Hotel.
And it looks like...
Yeah, the interior of The Shining. So it makes me want to go because I don't know, maybe not go because it's haunted.
I bet they put posters up.
Oh, yeah.
From the movie.
I hope so.
They gotta...
But basically, yeah, so interior shots, I'm not sure if they filmed on location. I'm pretty sure they recreated it in studio, but they might have shot on location for interior. Okay. So, yeah, it's pretty cool that you could actually visit the real locations. But I don't know why Stanley Kubrick ended up going with a different hotel for the basis of the film when the Stanley is the actual setting for Stephen King's version of The Shining.
I assume it's some production rights of some sort. Like, they can't get this place, or it's possible that Stanley's like, I just want to do my own spin on the script.
Yeah.
So let me just change some stuff up, and or the studio couldn't get a hold of it. I don't know.
Right. From what I know that Stanley Kubrick took a lot of creative liberties with his version of The Shining. And I think it leads a lot of people to think that it leads people to believe, and rightfully so, that the movie adaptation isn't as good as the book.
Right, it's not the true technically.
Right. But I will say, on its own, I think it's really good, personally. I think it's really good, like, on its own. Sure, maybe it doesn't follow the book closely, and it takes creative liberties. But I think standing on its own, I think that the film was good for me.
Right.
As weird as it was, I thought it was good.
It's got to be kind of unfortunate as, like, the creator of the book for Stephen King.
Yeah.
Because for, like, him as the creator of The Shining, most people are going to gravitate towards the movie over the book just because it's easier to digest.
Sure.
And if people only know it as the movie version, it's kind of like only, I guess, people who want to go further along into that story will actually go and read his book.
Yeah.
And see the actual version for it. It's gotta be difficult and weird for.
Yeah, totally. I think either way, though, it's always going to lead. If there is a book, it will. If people want to, like you said, go deeper into the world, they're going to eventually end up discovering the book and end up reading the book and make comparisons. And I actually know that Stephen King, or at least then, he didn't pay much attention to the film adaptations of his books. So I'm not sure if it really did bother him until he did see it, which I know that it did bother him when he did.
You're right.
Because he said that, it was probably one of the worst adaptations of any of his books, which is not surprising, but I wonder if he could look at it for just being its own film.
Probably not, because it has the same.
Right.
It's
his story.
Yeah, it's his story.
So,
like, how could you?
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, overall, like, I think one thing to really mention about this film are the shots. The shots in this movie are really well done, and a lot of it being Steadicam, and Steadicam was actually fairly new at this point, because Steadicam, just like as the name implies, just a camera being able to be used, and with little movement of the actual camera with the operator, because the operator could actually like travel at any place, like no matter if there were hills and like whatever.
Right. It's basically like a tripod, but movable.
Exactly.
And, obviously steady from Steadicam.
Right. It just allowed the operator to be able to move freely without worrying about, is my shot steady?
Right.
And at this point, so the film came out in 80, and the Steadicam came out like in 75, if I'm not mistaken. So only a handful of films had been made with this technology. And The Shining was one of those that was able to receive it.
I think it did it well, because I was thinking that, it's basically as if they storyboarded this movie, it's easily transferable to like just putting it on a tripod.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these shots are composition shots where it's very much balanced, very much I can see where we're going with the movements and everything. If you just put a still frame, again, it just was well off for it. So you could figure out what was happening through just positioning, and again, it formed composition shots for each scene.
Right. I think it's interesting because there is quite a bit of symmetry in the shots, or at least from what I found, especially like that hallway when they're walking through the lobby of the Overlook Hotel.
Okay.
There's a lot of symmetry right there, like with the picture frames on the walls and Like if you just split it in half, you're just like, wow, it's like so much symmetry in the shot, and you could tell that it was really thought through.
And then with the double meaning, it was able to convey the idea of like space and how big this area was for the viewers, and it gave that like eeriness because big spaces like we tend to like fill stuff with our minds, right? And if we like I told you when we were watching this, if I was to be the caretaker of this hotel,
Right.
I'd be scared to like just cross or just go into the corner because I'd be like, oh, what's on the other side?
Yeah.
And it just freaks me out. Like here in our house, it's relatively, it's not the size of the hotel, but
No.
and if I turn the corner like on a dark night, I'd be like, oh, what's this? I can't go downstairs,
Yeah.
without like, okay, let me
Any
turn
of
on
the
the
lights
lights.
on. No, yeah, for sure. It's a pretty big place and pretty freaky, especially for like the fact that he's supposed to stay there for like what, almost 5 months or about that.
Yeah, it's like in isolation too,
Yeah.
and it's just 3 people there,
Exactly.
and it's not like today where you can still access the outside with like internet and stuff like that, right?
Not then.
Right there, it's just you and television, maybe if the weather's okay,
Right.
and just you trying to fill time. Well, and he's a writer, so it was a perfect alone time for you.
Right.
But like I couldn't imagine for like his wife Wendy and Danny.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe again the world has changed, so like obviously today I couldn't even imagine. But like back then you had to do what you had to do.
Mm-hmm. I think along with the idea of the shots, it's with the idea of it, I really liked the moment when I really loved that moment when Danny's on his bicycle and or technically I guess it's a tricycle. Oh, anyway, he's on his bike and he's going around, and I love the shots. I love those shots when he's just like going around and the camera's following him and he's just like turning every corner and like it's going pretty fast and we're following him just like right behind him. And I really love seeing those shots. I think they're very effective.
They're pretty low angle too to get you, okay, we're in this kid's perspective.
Yeah.
And we see it through his viewpoint, especially when he stops and looks at room 237. We cut to like an under shot of like his arm, I believe.
Yeah.
And we just see the number of the room, and it gives us like ominous, oh, this thing is bigger or scarier than me type of emotion.
Right. Yeah.
That way, like, oh man, this is what he sees, and we're in his viewpoint.
Right. Yeah. I really like I think what also really helps the shots are like the set design. I really love. Well, I don't know. I think I like it for the film, not like I don't personally love it, I guess, but the carpet design and like throughout the hotel, there's a lot of carpet within this film.
I actually kind of like it because it gives us like character to it.
Yeah,
it's very old, and I wouldn't want it in my house.
That's
right?
what I'm saying. Yeah. Like that's what I mean. I think it fits for the film, but I wouldn't want it in my own house. But I think the set design really takes it to another level with the shots, especially with all the symmetry, and it's nice to look at. Like it's a beautiful film in terms of like the composition of the shots. I really enjoy looking at it, and I think the shots are well done with. There are fast cuts. There are really nice perspective shots, whether that be like it's fast or it's slow. It's got all of those.
I actually think that even order of shots is helpful, especially when dealing with a horror film. Just think back to when Danny was in the game room, right? He was throwing darts or whatnot.
Yeah.
And then eventually he turns around just to like see something, but we don't actually turn with him in like usual films. Or like I guess a generic film, we might turn with our character to immediately see what it was.
Yeah.
But instead, we got this shot of his face expression for like a still time, meaning that, okay, he already displayed the emotion of like, oh, being scared, like, what is that? And as us as viewers, we're thinking, oh, what did he see? You know, turn the camera,
Yeah.
but it doesn't turn the camera until eventually it turns the camera, you know, not on your time, but on the film's time.
The film's time.
And it actually, you know, helps this. It does it a lot throughout the film. You could, you know, find several examples.
Right.
But that's just a good way of showing, I guess, horror, because, you know, we start to fear this unknown thing that's not immediately showed to us, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, I think that works really well, and it's weird that for some time people considered it to not be a good horror film, and that's all because of the pacing and of the shots, and essentially the fact that it didn't give any kind of scare, really, which is kind of surprising. I think I would agree with that I don't know if it's necessarily like a scary film. I would consider it a horror film, but it's interesting to see that people in its initial review that they thought that it wasn't that it shouldn't have been considered a horror film, and it was lacking in terms of it being horror.
It could also be like a part of the times, because like I was thinking that, okay, I thought the same thing when I was watching this. I was like, oh, this is not really scary. You know, I'm not actually fearful of anything really in this story.
Yeah.
But it could be just my, perspective of, okay, there's a bunch of other horror movies at this point in time, you know, in 2020. But like back then in 1980, you know, there wasn't this whole genre of like, you know, really bad B-movie horror films and really bad slasher films, and you know, there wasn't that yet. You know, it's basically like, okay, we have older silent films, and like just the dawn and the beginning of, you know, that genre picking up. So maybe at then it could be considered just you know, it's off-putting, weird, you know, maybe that's scary. But today it's almost sort of laughable at moments.
Oh yeah,
because of it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it has a lot to do with just the way Jack Nicholson portrays the character.
Right. It's almost as if he like went overboard.
I don't know. I kind of like it though. I have to, like, as I was watching him, I just feel like, I don't know. I kind of like the way I like what he did with the character personally.
Right. It's definitely enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
Just to see how his character just leans into more likely into this crazier and crazier and crazier person.
But what's interesting though is the fact that that's one big difference from Stephen King's version of The Shining, and that Stanley Kubrick changed, is the fact that Jack Torrance is more wrestling with the spirits and the hauntedness of the hotel itself, and that's where the evil and the fear comes from. Whereas in Stanley Kubrick's, it's more based on Jack Torrance himself, that he's the one who's basically presenting it. Because sure, yeah, we get like these apparitions and these ghosts and whatnot, but it doesn't really feel like that the hotel is the one that's really giving off like, it doesn't feel like it's the hotel who's doing it, you know? It feels like it's more so him in the film version. But apparently that's a big difference between the film and the book.
Oh, interesting. That's actually pretty true. Yeah, because he's the only one that actually really interacts with it in the movie.
Right.
And it's not like at any point he really becomes too fearful of it. Only in like the woman scene in the bathroom.
Oh yeah,
where it's like he's actually somewhat scared, but other than that, he kind of like leans forward into this hotel. And you're right; it's almost as if he's battling himself rather than he's scared of whatever this hotel is capable of.
Yeah, and apparently that's one of the big differences in Stephen King's version, which I didn't know. And I was just like, I almost feel like it would work that way too. But I kind of like what the film does. I kind of like that it was more about. I like that it was more about in Jack's perspective, and it kind of came from him.
So would you like it? So it seems to me though that the film, it's like it's a bad guy who basically thinks that he's a good guy, but then just turns bad again. It's like the hotel realizes that he's a bad guy, because you know how in the movie, I don't know if it's in the same way in the book, where he hurt Danny at the beginning,
Right.
and then eventually, he's gonna hurt everybody else in the hotel, or is it what I'm inferring from the book? What you're saying is, so it's a good guy who gets turned bad with this hotel, and then does this horrifying thing.
Yeah, probably. I think it feels a little bit more like. Yeah, maybe it does feel like the hotel is. It almost feels like to me, it's like the hotel's latching onto the mistake that when he injured Danny a few months back, or it was only like 5 months or something like that. And it's almost like the hotel is dragging out the vices in Jack, and the hotel is almost like, bringing that out, and that's what we see in the film. That's
Right.
what it feels like, and I feel like that's what it's doing. I feel like that's fine. I'm interested to see, and like I said, I think with discovering more differences between the book and the film, it makes me want to see how it was actually more so about the hotel and how haunted it was, and the ghosts and demons that existed there.
That's true, because I want to say relative to like what we saw in the film, there wasn't too much hotel involved. Like there was only a basic couple of rooms, 237, the gold room, and the woman. Oh no, that was 237. What else was there besides like maybe some hallways? There wasn't actually that much.
Right. We had the kitchen. The kitchen was pretty prominent within the film.
No. But I guess I was saying to actually feature some sort of ghost or some sort of entity in that room, because we didn't get too much, and I wonder if the book actually has more to offer in that realm.
Oh, I see. I think so. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know. That the book was more so about the hotel, and like how haunted it was. And it was basically the hotel that was basically scaring off the family, but also taking Jack to a place where he didn't even want to go, because Jack was a good guy, and he ended up succumbing to what the hotel was like how it was influencing him, and what it brought onto him. So that's like a huge difference. The fact that it feels like in the film it's more about Jack's own mistakes, and Jack's previous mistakes in the past, and now that they're coming back to almost like in a way haunt him, and the hotel just drags it out.
Right, like that's what I said like before. It's more like the film story is a bad guy who thinks he's a good guy, but he's actually, this hotel brings him to believe that he's actually
brings out that bad.
Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Yeah,
and then the book, I assume, is more of this is actually a good guy, but then this hotel does something bad to him, and then in turn he turns bad, and we lead to the same scenario.
Right.
I wonder though, for like the end scenario where they show the photo, if that's the same in the book, or that's just an added thing for
the film. Yeah, that I don't know. I think one of the most interesting things about The Shining is the end. Really, the whole movie is very, like I said, so much ambiguity and a lot of open. It's very open to interpretation, but the ending, probably more than anything, is one of those moments, and it's like, well, what happened? Like, was it like, I guess it goes back to that classic thing, like, what do you think happened? Like, did Jack just, did he just think about like all of these things in his head? Was it all in his head? Did it actually occur? Was that person in the photo actually him? Did he become like one or like absorbed with the hotel towards the end when he did die?
Right. I always thought it was, oh, they're showing that maybe he's like this past life, that he was like in some ways reborn or something like that, and into like a new deja vu, because he said he had this deja vu all the time, that, oh, I feel comfortable here, and
Right.
maybe it's giving that idea that he was from the 1920s and he owned this hotel, but I don't know what devastation happened that occurred so that he come back to it. That's how I always inferred it as. I do wonder.
So it's more of like a metaphorical thing, where it's not like because basically, like, how does he exist both in the real time and in the present, but also in the past?
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's more like this idea of being reborn as another person. So like, let's say in the 1920s, he was there in the 1920s and he was the owner of the hotel. He dies at some point and then gets reborn as Jack Torrance or something like that. It's like a reincarnation story in some ways,
I see.
But because he had this connection to this hotel, whatever devastation he happened, it leads him back in this new life anyway. And he just ends up repeating, so that in some possibility, everybody who was affected by whatever happened back in 1920 comes back to just relive and recycle and recycle and recycle, possibly.
Yeah.
That's what I always inferred from the ending of the film. I'm interested in, like, I could see, oh, he's absorbed into the film or into the hotel now, because like the old caretaker, you could say that that's what happened to him. That's why he appeared in his in Jack's vision.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
I almost kind of felt like my thoughts were like he got like absorbed with it almost.
Really? That's what you always thought?
Yeah, like I always kind of thought that like I kind of thought both of what you were saying about how it's just a rebirth essentially, and here he is once again. But I also felt like at that point it's like, oh man, he's absorbed like with the hotel, and like he's there forever to stay. Because that idea, that theme came up like twice in the film, or yeah, I think twice.
Oh right,
like once from the twins saying that Danny played with us forever and ever, and then Jack telling Danny that he wished he could stay here forever and ever. So it's almost kind of like this idea of, oh man, towards the end when he did die, he was like absorbed with the hotel and he's there to stay. And it's
that's
like
possible. That's possible.
It's like pretty freaky.
That's actually a better scenario for like the book, if that makes sense, because of this thing. When you come to this thing, it takes you and never lets go. Like, that's a more scarier version of it.
If it's even there, though,
right?
So like, even if it's even there, because I don't know.
I actually think it has to be the absorbed now. I don't think it is this rebirth. It could be both.
But like I'm saying,
I think it's better for a horror thing.
Yeah.
If it's the absorption.
But like I'm saying though, it's open to interpretation. It's very ambiguous. Right. Like
there's probably like tens of thousands of theories.
Yeah,
what happened.
I bet. Yeah, it's very vague. There's a lot of double meanings, and going to that too, the idea of double meanings. Throughout the film. What I was noticing is that there's always like this. It's like there's this obsession for two things, right? I think maybe the first being
the twins, probably
the twins. It was that's where I was going to go to. Actually, almost maybe we could consider like the idea of maybe the very first moment we got of it is when Jack is going to get the job and we find out that there used to be this other caretaker. So the fact that there's like
second one,
there used to be a caretaker and now it's going to be him, right? So we already had this really early establishment of this idea of there used to be one and now there's another. Okay, so now we've got like two. And then we got the twins, obviously. We've got the two twins. And then we've also got
The Shining, because there's two people with The Shining.
Right. technically, isn't there 3? Because technically, doesn't Jack have it as well? Sort of? Because wouldn't you consider his moment when he looks through the maze a shining moment? Or is that him just going crazy?
I think that's how is it the Shining? Yeah, I think it's just him going crazy. I think it's just no, I don't think Jack has the Shining.
Okay, well,
I think it's just this hotel realizes, oh no, you're right, because what was Scottman's name in the film? It was Dick, right?
Yeah. Halloran.
Yeah.
Dick Halloran.
He did say that the Shining, if people have the Shining, it brings out the old stuff. So I guess it is possible that Jack has the Shining too. It's just it took him in a bad way. I don't know. What is the Shining power though? I was also confused on what's the rules to this power, and maybe not how they got it, because I don't think I'll ever get an explanation.
Sure, yeah.
But what can it actually do? Because I assume it's just future, and
yeah, well, sort of, kind of, but I mean, Halloran also explained it when in the scene when him and Danny were having ice cream, and he explained that it could even be to the point of communicating with another person without ever having to talk, because he mentioned that him and his mother actually used to do that. They never had to open their mouths, so it's assuming that she had it as well. But essentially, being able to communicate with each other telepathically, seeing future events, seeing things. I think those were the 2 main things, and whether or not it was a good or a bad thing, it didn't matter. I don't think.
Okay.
And that's essentially what The Shining was. That The Shining was a moment where you would either you were seeing something, that moment of because that ability shines on you or whatever. But going back to this idea of the rule of 2, yeah, God, what else do we have? Past and present. Did I say that already? Yeah, no.
I don't believe so.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. No, yeah, because we have the caretakers, we have the idea of past and present. We've got the 1920s, and then we got present day of the 70s. I'm guessing where things take place.
It's 70s, 80s, because I assume it's real time period. But there is the future too, because Danny was able to see the future. So isn't that technically 3?
But it becomes the present, because technically it only becomes the present. But yeah, sort of.
I don't really see too many 2s besides you.
Well, even,
I guess just what do you think the significance of the 2 is, if there is a 2 significance?
I kind of going back to this idea of double meaning. It literally refers to the idea that there is a double meaning within all of the things.
Oh.
And that all those basically
has a flip side. Oh, okay,
right. Yeah,
okay.
because everything that's happening in the present is a reflection of what happened in the past. All of those things, all those things are the twins go back to that. The caretakers go back to that. The past and present literally goes back to that.
Okay.
Yeah. There's so many this idea with 2 things leading back to this idea of double meaning.
He takes 2 drinks.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he takes 2 drinks. And the film, the 237 has double doors. I don't know. Maybe that's looking too far into it.
The woman flips from
young to old.
Yeah.
So there's this idea of there's. I think the idea of 2 is somehow significant.
Maybe.
Even or I would say even maybe with the idea that, oh my gosh, think about the fact that every time Jack is going through the hotel and he's seeing things or manifestations of people, there's always a mirror around, a reflection. There's always a mirror around whenever he sees a manifestation of people. So
really?
Yeah, because for example, first off, I don't know if I'm not going in order. I'm not going in particular order, but do remember that when he sees the woman, when she turns from young to old, he sees the mirror. Okay, so that's one. When he sees the caretaker, Grady, he's in the bathroom. There's a mirror clearly present when we're in that scene.
Okay.
When he talks with Lloyd, across from Lloyd, behind all the drinks and everything, there's a mirror right in the bar section.
Okay, sure.
Even
when he wakes up at the beginning,
was that an establishment of the fact that because like, what if early on, when he's looking at himself in the mirror, he's just imagining all of this, and he's essentially looking into his own self. Yeah, because like, what if it's just him like looking into the mirror, and he's like imagining all of it, and that all the way at the very beginning. What if he had just at that point he basically disconnects from reality, and it's just a reflection of his own inner thoughts.
So you think the stuff never happened, or what do you mean?
Like, it could be all in just his own mind. That he basically departed from everything at that moment when he woke up for breakfast, that like second day, which could be way far out. Like, that might not be the idea at all.
Right.
But, because maybe that mirror scene was just simply establishing that we were going to see this again.
Probably. No, like you said, there is a lot of mirrors involved. There's probably something there.
Yeah, because I mean, because maybe the idea there, because remember that first mirror shot, which is, I think, is when he wakes up from,
I believe so,
for breakfast in bed, when Wendy's giving him breakfast. He mentions, like, when she's like, oh, like the, how you liking it so far? And like, you got any ideas for the book and stuff that he's trying to write, because he's a struggling writer. Because what if it's every time when we see the mirror, it's just a reflection of what he's really thinking and what he's really seeing? Because in those moments when she's asking him if like he's got any ideas and stuff like that, it's almost like he's passive aggressive in those moments. Like, he's not actually like telling her the truth about like, oh yeah, I got so many ideas and everything.
I think that was just him in general with her.
You think so?
Yeah, I think like there isn't mirrors present.
So then why do we need to see it via a mirror? Why do we need to see that moment via the mirror? Like, why couldn't we just see it in a third person perspective instead of seeing? Well, technically, I guess we are still with the mirror, but I mean, why do we have to see that moment in a mirror?
Trying to figure out an answer. I don't know.
Like, why would, because like, assuming that everything in the film was intentional, which you would hope that it is. I know that it's to a certain point, like, things kind of get slipped under the rug. Right. And it just kind of like, oh, it was great in this moment, we're just going to keep it. Those things happen. But with Kubrick, I don't think so. Because even I know from Kubrick, I don't know if you know, but he filmed this movie in chronological order. And most films don't do that.
Really? He did it chronological?
He did it in chronological order.
That seems it's helpful to get your like, okay, what shot I need next, but like, it's definitely difficult because you could save time by just skipping around
for sure
places.
And this is why I said that I'm pretty sure that everything was, even the interior shots were on a set, so that way he would have the ability to do everything in chronological order. I'm not exactly sure if that's how he filmed all of his movies, but for this one in particular, he did it in chronological order. So it's like, with that in mind, I'm like, most likely everything has to be intentional within this film.
Right. Man, I'm trying to think of a answer for like, what would you do? Like, why show him
in the mirror at that point?
Because Wendy, you could see in the camera right now, but you couldn't see her through the mirror. You could only see Jack.
You can only see Jack.
And why did we see Jack as he woke up only and during that particular scene?
I think perhaps it's like I said, it's just this idea of him. We're getting a reflection of what he's actually thinking, because like when if you look into the mirror, I guess it kind of goes back to that idea of like
it switched. He's not the old Jack anymore. He turned into this other But no, because I would say he was still passive aggressive. Like even at the beginning, before that mirror shot, when he was getting the job, it was just so weird. He's like, okay, we looked around this hotel and stuff, and he just says everything very plainly. He's like, okay, because when she asked, did you get the job? He's like, yeah, I did. Like, he doesn't even really acknowledge it. He's like, yeah, and let's it's something else.
Right.
It's kind of like, I feel like that's their relationship. But it maybe
see, there we go. Like, even in his words, there's always like this, and then there's that. Whereas in like a mirror, there's always this, and then there's that.
Maybe. I don't know. We probably. I don't know if we're thinking too deeply. Maybe. I don't know.
Perhaps, but yeah, but I don't know though, because then why is a mirror always present during these visions, or like when the apparitions come about?
It's probably like you said, it's a transformation, but I don't know what at certain points.
If if it necessarily means that he just like imagined it all, because it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Right. I think it's probably like a transformation
of some kind.
Like a step forward.
Yeah. And now I'm just almost like thinking of like other bits and pieces of that could lead into that. But
well, let's talk about probably the most famous scene of the whole movie where he chops down the bathroom.
Oh yeah, the door.
Yeah.
Fun fact, apparently they actually shot it originally with a fake door, a prop door. But they actually had to replace it with the real door because Jack Nicholson, I guess a few months before the film, or I guess, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. He actually volunteered for some firefighter position.
So he learned how to use an axe?
He learned how to use an axe, so he tore through the prop door way too quickly, so it didn't look real enough. Oh. So they replaced it with the real door, which is funny because it's like, oh man, he didn't even know his own strength, so they had to replace the door with a real one. But oh yeah, really cool scene, iconic.
I was surprised to see that it looked like at some points they had to use a green screen with that door, where it looked like at moments.
Oh no, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so?
I never got that vibe.
I'll have to get an image when we actually post this on the video version.
I never got that vibe.
It looks as if they put a green screen for him when going through the door. So it's like the first layer with the door, and the back layer is him trying to go through it at some points. My only thought process, if that actually is true, if it's a green screen, that they wanted to have focus in the background, but the technology wasn't available at the time, so we could do focus on both. That's my only thought process. I'm like, if the green screen theory is correct. If not, then maybe, I don't know. I always thought that there was some lower resolution of him behind the door.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I caught that. I think it's there. Maybe it's the version we watched and had some.
Right. It could have just been a focus issue. It could have just been a focus issue rather than it being a green screen.
It's possible.
When I watched the scene, I didn't think like, oh, it's a green screen. I didn't think that.
Okay, I'll have to go back and look at that to see what happened.
But that's always that's definitely like an iconic scene when he's tearing down the door with the axe. He was going ham on it.
Right.
That's a pretty, like, I think out of all of the scenes in the film, that's probably one of the most terrifying. I guess in a way, it's almost kind of hard because you almost feel like it's difficult to connect with the characters, really.
I think it's yeah.
So you almost don't feel that fear.
Right. I don't even think I feel that fear anymore because the scene is that iconic. It's kind of like displaced out of the film now.
Right.
So it's almost as if you don't feel too much of really anything. It's like, in some ways, it's kind of laughable because, it's so iconic. You've seen so many parodies probably at this point where it's kind of like, you might laugh at, it's the scene, that everybody talks about, and, it's all over the internet,
Well, keeping it in context of the film, though, it feels more like secondhand fear. Like you're feeling the fear for them, but not necessarily you're not feeling it.
Talking about that, like
there we go. Two second. No, I'm just kidding.
Talking about like you're not feeling the stuff.
Yeah.
The shots. If we're going back to shots, the whole structure of shots is not supposed to feel like you're the characters. It's always third person. It's never. You barely get over the shoulder shots in this movie. You might get it maybe only for Danny. Maybe no. There probably is one for each character,
right?
But it's very few. Most of these shots are just isolated towards you're seeing the character either in third person, but never through their perspective. Most of the time, because even like at the beginning when he was getting the job, Jack was getting the job. They could have easily did over the shoulder shots in that room
Mhm.
in Jack's perspective, but
Right.
we didn't get those shots. It was always
No.
basically a camera right in front of the actor. At all three
Right.
people that was in that
Right.
office, and because of that, it disconnected us from being ever associated with a certain character. And I guess that's interesting for a beginning of the film because usually you want to connect to a certain character, like the main character or
Right.
whatnot. And doing that purposely is that disconnect for the audience.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was like you don't, like you just mentioned, like you don't really get a sense of connection with any of the characters,
Right.
and even as early as the beginning of the film. And so, like in that moment when he's tearing down the door in the bathroom, it's just kind of like I said, I felt like it was secondhand fear, and it
Mhm.
wasn't like I was actually feeling it. It was
Right.
more so I was feeling it for Wendy.
Mhm.
It wasn't actually me feeling it though, and like you said, I think separating and the disconnect for the audience, that's the point. I think that was the point for Stanley Kubrick to that was his point, to disconnect the audience from connecting with any of the characters, which in some ways I think in most horror films, you want to be in some connection with the character, like you were just saying, like
Mhm.
specifically the main character, because that's the way you feel the fear.
Right.
But in this term, you're kind of just watching it take place. You're watching it happen. But that's a really cool scene. Like you said, yeah, it could be laughable at points. It's tense. It's intense. And every time when Wendy like takes the knife and she slices Jack's hand right as he's about to open the door,
Uh-huh.
it always gives me like shivers. Like I always just get the chills because I'm like, oh God, I felt that slice.
Oh.
I'm just like, oh no. And I always hated that scene because like, or that moment, because she just like, slices his hand right as he's about to open the door.
I always felt like she's gonna drop the knife.
Oh,
every
yeah, I know,
time.
I
Every
know.
time I was like, she just holds it very like wobbly, and it's kind of like you're gonna drop it. I'm surprised she didn't.
Yeah, I know. She had a firm grip on that. On that knife.
Apparently.
It's actually like speaking on that though. It's actually I don't know if you've heard anything about this, but have you like heard any of the controversies with Shelley Duvall, who played Wendy, and her involvement with this film?
No, I've never.
It's kind of sad because like I heard that like although like I think she had a pretty like good and decent performance in this movie, but it's sad because apparently like it was forced that Stanley Kubrick did not have a good working relationship or any kind of relationship at all with Shelley Duvall and vice versa.
Oh,
There
really?
like it got to the point where it was like she apparently like she redid, I don't know what scene it was. She redid like a scene like 126 times.
I've heard that she had to redo scenes apparently.
Yeah.
And that, like, for example, for Jack Nicholson, he did it like once or twice and it was fine. I've heard that before, but
Right.
I never knew like they had Stanley and her
Right.
had a disconnect, I guess.
Apparently it was pretty bad. It was a
Really?
really bad working relationship between the two of them. And it got to the point where like, supposedly, I haven't looked into this completely, but apparently it got to the point where like Shelley Duvall was like not in a good place mentally after
Oh,
the filming of The Shining because of Kubrick, because of him.
okay.
And I was just like, oh, like I don't know what that, I don't know
What the circumstances are. Or
I don't
what
know the
happened.
circumstances or the
Right.
details, but apparently like it was not a good working relationship. And actually it wasn't the best working environment during production because Stanley Kubrick was like I said, this is why I don't think anything was not intentional. He was so meticulous that like they would have long work or like production days, really long, and just so they could get said shots. And like it drove the actors to exhaustion. Like it was that bad. And like apparently like the bar scene between Jack and Lloyd,
Mhm.
Lloyd's actor like even mentioned in some documentary thing that it was like the start date was like 9 a.m. and it ended at 10:30 at night.
Wow.
That whole scene, they rehearsed it for 6 weeks, and then they shot it from the 9 to 10:30. 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. that same day. And the guy who played Lloyd remembers how like his clothes were like drenched in sweat, like after
Wow.
that film day, like after that day on set.
I'm surprised because like for those shots or the ones interactions with him, there was cuts, so you didn't need to really, you could just cut your stuff, and you'd be fine.
Right.
But it wasn't like, all in one. You had to make sure that there was no cuts between it. So why did it have to go so long?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, it's like like the fact that they rehearsed it for 6 weeks. Like, oh my God, for those, like, they were pretty relatively short scenes. But honestly, I almost felt like it did a good thing. A good thing came out of this. Is that every time I ever watched those moments, I always felt like there was chemistry between those two characters. And honestly, it's only probably because they've rehearsed that scene so many times that they already knew what they were going to say and how they were going to deliver the line. So I think it helped ultimately to establish like the sense of like this relationship between the two characters, even though there wasn't supposed to be one, but underlying this double meaning, there was one with Jack Torrance and Lloyd, the bartender. But yeah, essentially going back to it all, I don't think it was a fun time filming this movie. It was not a fun time. Did it? I think it resulted in a good film. Maybe not to critics in the beginning, but overall, like in time, I think they came with a good product.
Right.
In my opinion.
It's everybody knows the film nowadays.
Yeah.
It was elected to, I believe it was preserved now.
Yeah, back in only in 2018.
Right. It wasn't too long ago that they added it to preserve in the Library of Congress. So there's that.
Speaking on that, because we watched the we have one of the DVD copies. And I was actually thinking, I was like, we don't own the film in a higher definition format. And I was just like, I actually would really love to own it like on Blu-ray or 4K Ultra HD. And I was looking into if they have a 4K version, and they only just made a 4K version in 2019, and they screened it in May, right before COVID hit, or actually like a whole year actually. But back in May of 2019, they screened the 4K version of The Shining, and I was just like, oh man, I want to see a 4K version of The Shining. I was like, I want to do that. Like I want to see that, and I was like, I want to own it. And it makes me want to have to go and get an HD version of the film. And apparently, I didn't know this either. But when Kubrick died, in his will for I think any of his movies, but I know for Shining in particular, he demanded that The Shining be shown in the same full screen format, which they call open matte. It's called open matte, and maybe you already know that, but I just want to basically, open matte is essentially to fill a 16:9 aspect ratio.
Oh, he didn't want to put it in widescreen or
No.
something? That's crazy. He would write the Shining stuff on his will.
Well, not only The Shining.
Crazy.
I think this was for all of his films. Films.
Don't change the way I put my films.
Yeah. He didn't want it to be shown in a widescreen aspect ratio, which is interesting because I'm like, so basically, if you were to find a Blu-ray copy or a 4K digital or a 4K Ultra HD, you're going to find it in that same open matte 16:9 aspect ratio.
Right. As long as it was actually shot in that ratio before, right? There's no point to put bars or any widescreen
because he never framed it that way, and that's the whole reason. But I was like, oh, that's interesting because most HD releases of any film nowadays will be put into widescreen, or you'll see that widescreen is
it depends on how it was shot, though.
No, I get it, but basically what I'm saying that more than likely. Films are framed for the widescreen aspect ratio because that's what they want in a movie theater. For a director usually has in mind that widescreen aspect ratio. They basically because if they frame it that way, that's how they want it to be distributed. So that's when they end up putting up that those bars on the top and the bottom to letterbox it. But essentially. Kubrick had in his will.
Don't change
it. Leave it as an open matte version. So I'm excited to see a 4K version in that filling up like a standard 16:9 aspect ratio that you see on most flat screen HD TVs.
I don't think it'd help if, like, let's say The Shining was put in widescreen. I don't think it helped the film. I think
exactly.
In some ways, it deters it. Like it does. It helps it because usually widescreen is for like intense. It's supposed to intensify stuff, or make you could, since it's a horror film, make you fearful.
Yeah.
But especially with the openness of these shots, I think that alone does it. And you're basically cutting off that information if you don't have it.
Do you know how different The Shining would feel in a widescreen aspect ratio?
Right.
It feels different.
It's totally different.
It feels so different. So like I'm excited to look into a format that isn't the DVD release of The Shining. It would be cool to see it in HD in all of its glory. No, but yeah, so like a lot of really great moments and great scenes, great shots and everything.
I do want to point out that something that like completely stood out to me that I didn't see before was the music, actually. So for the music, I don't dislike it, but I thought it was a little over the top at points. Okay. And I don't know if you feel the same way when you're actually watching it. I feel as if it was like a disconnect at certain areas. So, because just to give our viewers a background, we watched, I believe it was H2O, Halloween H2O a while back. Oh, yeah. And we learned about how there was different scores for that film. Right. And if you watch it with a different score, it might change the entire stuff.
Right.
And, one feels like it fits and one kind of is like, oh, what are they doing and stuff like that. And I felt as if when watching The Shining, I felt as if it was a little over the top and maybe didn't fit for some scenarios. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I think I felt like it was busy in certain moments. Like it was pretty busy and there was a lot going on in those particular scenes. Specifically, like the moment when, when is it? I think it's like when Wendy walks in on Jack when he's trying to write for the first time.
Okay.
And then like he tears off the page off the typewriter and there's this huge like crescendo of something when he rips the page, and then it kind of just abruptly cuts to silence and then the dialogue begins. That was like kind of like a lot for that moment. There's another one too where like we just get like this loud like crashing bang out of nowhere, and it was just like, oh, that was a little, I don't know if we needed that. And also maybe that entire moment when Jack has the axe and he's like walking around everywhere and there's like so much like sound just like happening. Yes, I think it's busy, but honestly, I actually like it. Okay. I think, yes, I agree with you that, yeah, it could be like a little bit over the top at moments, but honestly, I like it because I felt like, for me, the emotions that I was getting is like, since there was so much like happening, like the sensory overload in terms of audio and like even in the story as well, I think it kind of helped like give this like feeling of like, oh man, Jack is going crazy. And I think that all those other moments that we were getting like these hints of those busy moments, we were just getting this piece. We were getting this piece of insanity for a moment. And in the moment when he does have the axe and when he's going all out and trying to kill his family, it's all getting released. And I like that because that's what it was giving off for me. Sure, was it distracting at moments? Totally. I'll agree with you on that. But I was just like, I kind of like being fed in to this crazy and the insanity that Jack was feeling.
Yeah. I definitely think it helped for like certain moments, right? Like especially like when we're actually there and he's very hectic, right?
Yeah.
But like I towards the beginning of the film, I really felt that like when I was hearing the music, I would always think to myself, why did I hear that instrument right now?
Oh.
Like it was like an out of place. It was very much like, okay, we need a certain scene. Let's play. Like it's almost as if, at least for me, I would think, no. Let me start over.
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe for a general person,
Okay.
I would think people think piano is associated with like sadness, maybe.
Okay.
Right? I think that's a fair assessment. That's like a sadness. I don't think, or like a serious, maybe like something in that realm,
Okay.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's almost as if, I'm not saying they used a piano in this scenario, but
Mhm.
it's almost as if, okay, we need this like a serious moment. Let's accompany a sad instrument like a piano into the serious moments. But it was just out of place. Again, I'm not trying to say that they did this or like, oh, the piano is always sad, but like I always felt like as if, okay, I associate this sound instrument with this other scenario, but they did it for a scenario that wasn't that scenario, and it confused me. And maybe that was the intent. You know, maybe they were trying to use sound in the same way they're trying to use the shots and the story going along. But I always felt this like, I felt it's an uneasiness.
I think that's what it was going for. Like, since you felt that, because I like how you're pointing this out, and even though like, yeah, maybe it was like a little too busy, but it is almost like the music was a disconnect for you in some points, and going back to what we were saying about Kubrick trying to disconnect his audience for the trying to relate to the characters in any way. I think it was also being established in the music as well, even like with the music, and just in general pacing of the film. Notice how like even at times, like in particular, like in the beginning, we were getting a tour of the Overlook Hotel.
Mm.
It's almost like we don't necessarily know where we're going, and I guess it's even more explicit in terms of the maze that there's this disconnect, and like we don't exactly know where we are. The maze being the literal like symbol of that. But like even the Overlook Hotel itself and the way that the shots are like we're going through and getting a guide and a tour of the place.
That's true, because like all these other locations, we don't know in like what vicinity of the hotel it's in. You know,
Right,
like
yeah.
their room.
Yeah.
Where is that located
Where
in the
is it?
hotel?
Yeah.
Maybe we can find out where the lobby is, but like other than that, like the kitchen, their room,
Right.
the game room,
Yeah.
all these other places, like who knows where they're at? You know, where's the golden room?
Yeah, where's the gold room? Where does it sit? Like, where does that massive hall sit inside of that
Right.
hotel?
It's like we don't know.
Yeah, where is that? Exactly. Like we don't even know like how to actually like
Map
get
it
there.
out,
Yeah,
yeah.
like there's no
Unless you actually go to this hotel and like, okay,
Sure, right. But there's no actual map, which is interesting. Which is another like disconnect. Like it just kind of like it just exists. And that's like another like kind of creepy thing, but an intentional thing that Kubrick put in to disconnect us as an audience member from watching the film, which is actually like when we're talking through it, I'm just like, wow, I'm starting to notice it a lot more. In terms of like music, in terms of pacing of the shot, even like why is this office of the guy, like the Earlman guy, if that's I believe that's his name, the one who guided Jack throughout the entire Overlook Hotel. Like, why is his office like in the bowels, like deep in, like hidden somewhere? Like, you know,
I don't know. Was it?
It kind of was, if I'm not mistaken. I was even doing some background research on this. Even like the I don't remember who it was. I think it was the set designer. I can't remember now. But they even like intentionally put in like windows in certain parts of the or didn't. Either put windows or didn't put windows in certain areas of the Overlook Hotel that should or should not have windows. In the intent to confuse the audience. That like, why is there a window there? Or like, why is it this high? Or like, why isn't there a window in this room? Like, I think in the what's it called? That one room where the lady was in, that green room, right? There were no windows in that room, if I'm not mistaken, and there should be. There are no windows at all in that room.
I don't think I paid attention enough to know windows.
And honestly, I didn't either. But apparently, I don't think there are any in that scene when there should be. Like in any kind of room, and for a hotel, usually there's like at least one window,
right?
You know. And there are none in that one.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
And I'm just like, oh, wow, I never realized that. But apparently that was an intent. Oh man, I just thought of another two thing. Going back to the whole two idea. Remember when they were taking that guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the very beginning, when he was like saying goodbye to people and whatnot. Remember those like that one like people who told him goodbye as they were like gonna
the two ladies?
Yeah, they were gonna go see the room. There was two of them. There was two of them. Like, this is weird. Like, there's so many like two things going on here. Oh man.
Maybe that's something.
There's one thing we haven't talked about. Oh, also, even when Lloyd and Jack talked to each other for the first time, it was just them two alone in the room. It was just the two of them.
You're not wrong.
Forming that connection, that bond. And with that in mind, we got to talk about the gold room. That's one of my favorite rooms and scenes in the entire film is the gold room. Love the depth of it. Love the set dressing. Like, oh man.
The music, obviously.
The music is very good, especially the second time around when Jack goes and sees the ballroom and we're transported into the 1920s and we hear that wonderful music. That's such a good scene.
Right. It's definitely I think the music adds to it, and then learning about the past, learning about the previous caretaker, and that flip into what's gonna happen now, and that's where like it starts, because I don't think he even saw anything until probably the woman, because once the woman happens, right, he starts to see apparitions more and more and more,
Right.
and it kind of like continues.
Yeah.
Oh no! It was Lloyd. Lloyd's the first one he sees, right? Because the woman's after. Yeah.
Yeah,
He goes
you're
to the
right.
gold room first, sees Lloyd, and that's what starts is his stuff.
Yeah, that's what starts like him seeing a bunch of weird things. When I think the gold room, when he goes in there, when it's filled with people, when he's transported into the 20s, that's one of the best scenes in the film. When he not only talks to Lloyd and like just his interaction with them is just so like it's so eerie, but it's so normal for him because he knows Lloyd from a past life.
It's cool to see this location 3 times because we saw it first when we were discovering the hotel for the first time with normal everyday people.
Yep.
And then second with nobody but Jack until Lloyd comes. And then the third one was old school, and it was cool to see this transformation from time periods throughout it.
It's neat. Even like with that scene when he meets the old caretaker, Grady, when they go into the bathroom. I really hope that a bathroom exists somewhere, like in real life.
That's so
like that's such a neat bathroom, like all that red and the whites. Oh man, that's a really cool scene.
There's no way that's still there. There's no way.
Yeah, probably not. I would really hope that they someone somewhere they recreated the bathroom just so you could say that you've been in the Shining bathroom. No, yeah, really cool scene. A lot of oh yeah, the scene in the bathroom when he's talking with Grady after Grady accidentally spilled some drinks on Jack is a very eerie, like just messed up scene. Them talking with each other about how Jack thought Jack recognized him and knew that he used to be the caretaker there and everything. And like when they were talking and discussing with each other that entire way, it was just so eerie. And Jack was like obviously a little bit frightened that he was talking to this guy.
Right. It's like, I know you, but what's happening? It's like, how are you here?
Exactly.
And there was this disconnect of information.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, that's not true. But wait, I saw, it didn't make sense.
Right.
And it helped with the fact that we were learning more about this hotel and our previous characters and what Jack could do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it just added to this uneasiness because there were just 2 men standing in the bathroom and we saw these far shots. Just turning and turning depending on what's happening.
Yeah, pretty freaky, I gotta say. It was pretty it was pretty weird. That music and even the music has this really nice like subtle, you could hear it in the background while they're in the bathroom as well. Even when he's like in the ballroom, you can hear the music in the distance, and it's very effective. I always love those kind of scenes when you can hear the music in the distance. and it's still going. And the music with that 1920s music just really adding to the scene. Yeah, great moment. Love the gold room. Love those scenes.
Yeah, brilliant. So, recommendations. Would you recommend The Shining?
Yeah, I definitely would. This is a movie that you would want to see because, like, after I saw it, to put it simply, like the words that came out of my mouth, I was like, "This is a messed up film." Like, this is such a messed up film. But honestly, overall, towards the end, I was just like, I like it. I like it for how messed up it was.
You should definitely see this film. It's very famous.
Yeah,
everybody should at least see it once.
Yeah,
I think you should see it multiple times because, again, like us, I don't think we appreciated it the first time, especially since we saw it probably when we were little. And nowadays, growing up and have this sense of what films can do,
right?
It definitely gives you an appreciation on what was capable at that time with all the aspects of the story. You got your shots, the story,
right?
Music and
characters,
what you could do to present this horror film to the audience.
And even then, even when we were younger, like those scenes were already iconic. Like even when we were younger, like everything from the "Here's Johnny" scene, from the opening of the following of the car, to the. I remember even seeing like the gold room being a pretty iconic scene when I was younger. Even the maze towards the end when they're running through the maze, that was a very iconic thing that I remember seeing all of the time when my parents were like watching the movie.
It was probably the maze and the turning down of the door, the bathroom door. Those are the two things
that I remember the most. Yeah. Like those, like because of our parents watching The Shining like all that time ago when we were younger, it's like one of those movies that I'm just like, it means something to us in a weird way, that it's just like it's kind of that movie that's kind of like Jack at the Overlook Hotel. That movie's just always been there. Just like how he's always been there or at the hotel. But no, yeah, like I definitely recommend it because there's so many iconic moments, iconic shots and like characters and even costumes. The music, even though it's not a close adaptation to the book, to Stephen King's The Shining,
right?
I still think it's a movie worth watching and taking it. Even if you've read the book, it's one of those films that you probably want to just take it on its own. Yes, there's going to be elements of the book in the film, but I know from, like I said, from friends and from doing some background research that it doesn't exactly line up with the events in the book.
And it's also, I would recommend the Shining as well. And it's easy to learn from as well. It's a film where you can, I can learn shot composition. I can learn how to effectively tell a horror story with how I compose things around the world.
Yeah.
And typically today, I would say the horror genre is defined by the slasher and the gore and all that stuff.
For sure.
And in this, you barely got anybody that actually died, right? And
besides Halloran.
Right. And it's a learning tool, and it's definitely if you see it, you can pick out something from it to take from.
Right.
If you're learning to do films or interested in how it's made, it's definitely a film that you should at least see for learning purposes.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I think Stanley Kubrick's a good person to go to. In terms of understanding, it might be a different idea, but in terms of like,
that's true. That's true.
Composing a shot, I agree.
Right.
Also, I got to mention, I almost didn't mention it in the iconic shots, the like the ocean of blood coming from the elevator.
How do we forget that
That's
one?
huge. Also,
That's huge.
Also red rum.
That's true.
Red rum on the door. That's an iconic thing.
That's true. How did we miss those two?
I know. I almost missed those when, like, I didn't want to like forget those. Those are really iconic things that I even remember when we were younger and didn't. I remember that blood scene scaring me. That sea of blood just coming down the hallway. I remember I was like freaked out by that.
I always remember thinking, what does red rum mean? But if you actually watch the movie, it tells you what it means. So I was like, how did I ever think that? Way back when I was like, I'm dumb or something.
And you were young, so
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
I
right.
understand.
Right.
No, but yeah, this is definitely a movie I recommend to people.
Everybody should watch it. If you're on a horror thing, then you should definitely check out The Shining.
Yeah, I would say that it's not necessarily like it's a psychological horror. It's not one of those that it's really going to give you a scare, but it's one of those like it's going to get you thinking, and it's going to get you into like the human mind and like the evil that could exist there and those kind of thoughts. And that's what I got out of The Shining. And yeah, like I really liked everything from just like the shots and the way they were put together. I really like those really quick splices too, like those quick splices of like of like the twins, for example, of when we saw like Danny just like screaming for a moment and then it cut away to something else. I really loved the weirdness of it, the odd angles, the long pauses too.
Even the day transitions from just it's Thursday, it's Tuesday,
Right.
it's
4 p.m.
p.m.
Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of really great things in here, a lot of messed up things too. But overall, I think it creates a movie that's all on its own. It is something good, and it's terrifying. And like and if you think about it in a certain way, it's just kind of like, what does this all mean? It leaves you with a lot of questions.
Right.
I'll give you that.
It's definitely a thinker, watch it 2 or 3 times, you probably still won't understand.
Yeah, probably. You definitely got to do some background research in order to get some kind of understanding for the film or any kind of appreciation, perhaps. But yeah, definitely one worth watching. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, there we have it. We've got Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film, The Shining. Yeah, watch the film. Also, I would recommend reading the book if you haven't read it. I think I'm definitely going to look into the book now that I've learned more about the differences between the film and the book.
Right, definitely check that out.
For sure. Yeah, definitely one of those movies that you should check out. So
it will change your life.
Oh yeah,
forever.
Oh yeah. When you said that, the way it reminded me of that line when he's just like, "Wendy, the light of my life." I always love that moment. It's so funny. It's so funny the way he delivers that line, and I'm just like, it's so perfect.
The one line that always gets me is the when he's like checking out everything, and he's like, "Oh, it seems pretty nice." So yeah, it's cozy.
Yeah, it's just like, oh man, it's just like, do you really believe that though?
Yeah.
So, also just real quick.
Last note.
Keep in mind, why is it called the Overlook Hotel? Is it because that like everything that we're looking at is like, think about it. Like, why didn't we see that one picture of Jack that's in the middle of the hallway in the very beginning? And why didn't the character see it?
I think it's the Overlook Hotel because we're looking over these characters. We're never associated with any of them at any certain point, and that's it. We're just looking into their mystery, as a third person spectator.
That's a good way to put it. Could it also be perhaps that there's so many details within this hotel and so many like twists and turns in the maze that we just overlook all the details? And
that's possible too.
we overlook those details and those things that we think that are just like a normal thing, but we overlook this one small detail that could lead and give the meaning to everything.
That's definitely a possibility.
So there you have it, The Shining. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The End Credits. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The End Credits Podcast and over on Twitter at The End Credits. If you're watching the video version, make sure to subscribe to the End Credits YouTube channel. That's it. Thank you and goodbye.